Merhaba, bu derste sizinle, bu videoda daha doğrusu sizinle Vanessa ile Speaking English with Vanessa kanalından Vanessa ile çekmiş olduğumuz sohbetin 3. ve son bölümünü paylaşacağım. Aslında bunu ne zamandır paylaşmayı planlıyordum ama bir türlü fırsat olmadı. Böyle yıl sonunun bir hareketliliği vardı. Nihayet bugün yorumlarda birisi sormuş, hocam 3. bölüm ne zaman gelecek diye. Ben de o enerjiyle hemen bilgisayarın başına geçtim, düzenledim. Vanessa ile sohbetimizin son kısmında yaklaşık 15-20 dakikalık bir kısım. Sohbet güzel. Yani hem İngilizce konuşma açısından güzel, hem Vanessa çok enerjik, söylediği şeyler güzel ve aynı zamanda karşılıklı olarak farklı konularda fikir alışverişi yapıyoruz. Sizin için keyifli, güzel bir bölüm olmasını dilerim.
I'd like to talk about specific skills. For example, when it comes to learning English as a foreign language. So, for example, we are generally taught with regards to a skill such as reading, listening, writing, and speaking. So, for example, from my experience, reading and listening, like investing time and effort into reading and listening, it pays dividends when it comes to speaking and writing. Because, like, for example, the more I read about in a field such as nuclear energy, the more I can write about it, the more I can talk about it. And there were some funny instances. For example, like my native language is Turkish, but since I was taught in English at university, I could talk about certain topics way more fluently in English than I could in Turkish. And that was very weird. Like, for example, I was taking the American English, like American literature class, or maybe a cross-cultural communication class, and the whole reading list was in English. I was reading articles in English. Then it was very interesting because when I tried to explain those things to Turkish people, like in Turkish, it proved very challenging. But then I realized, okay, the more I'm exposed to this kind of material, the easier it becomes to really talk about this, to really write about this. And I think it makes sense to create a system where reading and listening kind of feeds into writing and speaking. Do you do something in that regard?
I really feel like you said, those, usually I call them the passive skills versus the active, like you're creating language skills. So passive being reading and listening, and active speaking and writing. So when you're doing those passive skills, like reading a book or reading articles or listening to a professor give a speech or maybe a TED talk or a movie, you're building things in your brain, even though you can't physically see that, but you're building that language base so that when it comes time to actively use it, it's there, it's waiting to be used. And I think that it's important for students to know that we can be exposed to something once, and maybe you kind of remember, oh, I've heard that word, it rings a bell, but I don't really know exactly what it is. But you need to be exposed to it again and again and again. So don't be too angry at yourself or hard on yourself if you listen to a TED talk about nuclear energy, and then you can't recall all the vocabulary and everything immediately. You probably need to, listen to that TED talk, read a book, read an article, listen to a podcast, really have different sources to have it stick. But you need to do those passive things in order to build your vocabulary and grammar and just kind of feel more comfortable with English. That's certainly the basis.
Yeah. Well, are there any like resources, sites, materials that you refer your students to? For example, you mentioned TED Talks, and I think it's a great resource. Or sometimes I refer my students to New York Times, especially those who are prepping for TOEFL or for academic exams. Like, are there any resources that you would recommend for students?
I feel like if they're doing exam work, that's maybe more your territory. I've helped students with some exams in the past, but for exposing yourself to real natural conversations, first of all, if it's extremely difficult to understand, take a step back, don't feel bad about that. And then, after a couple weeks of listening to something a little bit slower or simpler, then go back to that. But finding, if you're interested in animals, I love watching animal documentaries, and I found an animal documentary channel on YouTube in French. This was so great for me. I learned a ton of vocabulary about that specific thing. So if you like mechanics and building cars, great, look for this type of thing on YouTube, or even Google it and try to read some blogs and listen to podcasts about those things that you're already interested in. If just in general resources, I usually just stick with the basics, like looking up stuff on YouTube, looking at recipes in English. If you're looking about how to bake a cake, look for it in English. Try to immerse yourself in that way. Use TED Talks, use podcasts. I made a couple of videos on my channel about specific resources, like specific podcasts, specific YouTube channels for English speakers. So these are YouTube channels that I watch just for my own entertainment and education. But if students are ready to take it to the next level and hear really what native speakers sound like, usually pretty fast, then they can take a look at that video and use those recommendations. But trying to think of it from a native speaker perspective, what would Vanessa be looking at on the internet? What would she try to find? Where would she try to find her news or type of entertainment or videos or music? Those kind of things, trying to do that in English will help that immersion. That was kind of a long answer to your question,
but it helps. It definitely helps. And one thing you mentioned was integrating their passions with what they're studying. So I think that really helps because, for example, when I was learning English, I was in a language classroom, and I was also very interested in computers, but I also had to prepare for exams. So I really didn't have much time to work with computers and programming. But I thought, interesting. Can I kill two birds with one stone? And I started reading programming books in English to help me learn English and programming at the same time. And it really helped. Like, for example, if you're passionate about something, I mean, someone is passionate about music, or someone else might be passionate about, I don't know, chemistry. And the chances are that there's probably someone writing about it, or someone shooting YouTube videos about it. So you can probably find materials and really watch them or consume them in English, and can enjoy yourself and learn at the same time. And I think it's a great strategy.
Yeah, and that's just going to keep your motivation going so that you can pass that exam, or you can go to Disney World and communicate in English, whatever that end goal is. Just keeping that motivation is really important for sure.
Well, since you work with a lot of students, I was wondering if you see recurring problems, or like common problems that your students face, and how you address those problems. I mean, I don't know, maybe motivation problems, maybe problems with regards to certain skills. Like, do you see recurring problems with different students with different levels? Like, are there generalizable like problems that you encounter?
Certainly. I think there could be a million to mention, because it seems like there's always different things coming up. Because my YouTube channel and my courses focus on gaining that confidence to speak and then using speech. One of the things that I really try to push for my students, and something that, because I feel like it's something that they often have difficulties with, is putting yourself out there. And I feel like I've tried to explain that phrasal verb to students a lot, like just taking the opportunities when they come. So for example, in the course, the Fearless Fluency Club, a lot of students, and I try to encourage this, meet together on Skype every day, every week, and I kind of have a system where they can find each other, but they need to take that next step and contact the other person and do that. I see this all the time in my YouTube comments. I don't have a speaking partner. I don't have anyone I can speak with. And maybe in your city, there's not an option, or there's not something that you can find, but just having that confidence in you to put yourself out there, to take that opportunity. It's a little risk that maybe when you contact that other person, you don't know what they'll be like. They don't know what you'll be like too. So they're probably feeling the same thing, but just having the confidence to get outside your comfort zone and try something different, whether that's reading a book in English, but usually, at least for my students, that's trying to really use English and speak, even if it's just 5 minutes. So something that's really interesting that a group of my students have done is they organized a daily Facebook Messenger chat where they talk together. They meet up 3 different times a day in different time zones. And in my course, I have just a list of questions that use the vocabulary words that we're studying. So it's pretty organized, pretty, structured, but it's still a little bit of freedom. And they just go through those questions and ask each other, what's something that you were supposed to do yesterday, but you didn't do? If we were studying the word supposed to, for example.
Yeah.
And they just ask each other. And it's a way to have a little more confidence or structure in your conversation without feeling like, I don't know what to say next. I don't know how to talk to them. You're having some structure, and that's great. Like,
it sounds great.
Yeah, just having that confidence to try that and put yourself out there. It's so hard for everyone, I think, but some people struggle with that more.
Kind of. Yeah. Because, I mean, personally, I've got a lot of experience in the teaching and the learning context, but still, like, when I was calling you, I was like, okay, this is great, but of course, she has more experience than I do, and you feel vulnerable in a sense.
Sure, every situation. I feel like something that I watched recently actually was an interview. I think it was an interview maybe with someone like Johnny Depp, someone who's really well known, who has done tons of things. And he said every time he walks on stage to give a speech or to accept an award, he gets so nervous. And hearing that, it's simple, but it made me feel like, oh, okay, he's nervous, but he's still doing it. And I'm sure it's gotten better with time. Maybe at the beginning, he was so extremely nervous, and now it's just a little bit less nervous, but that it's normal. That's a totally normal feeling. Whenever students meet with me in the course, students can talk with me through Facebook live lessons together once a week. And almost every time when I talk with someone, they say, oh, I feel kind of nervous right now. And it's great to say that and get it out. And then I just tell them it's totally normal. It's fine. And that's good to acknowledge it and then realize you're doing something about it. You're taking the step to get out there and get out of your comfort zone to speak. So realizing opportunities when they're there and taking them is difficult for everyone. And in a second language, it's another level, but it's so important. It's really the only way that you're going to improve is just doing something that's outside your comfort zone. So take that chance.
Yeah. I think acknowledging your fears and trying to manage them, because, for example, you were referring to Johnny Depp or someone else. So the thing is, maybe they're not feeling less fearful. They've just learned to manage it better. You might feel the same amount of fear, but you might be better at handling it. So, for example, and I think a certain dose of anxiety and fear is kind of natural and helpful. And there are studies showing that, like, for example, as a student, if you're not anxious, like if you don't feel any discomfort in prepping for an exam, you might get lazy. But if there's a healthy bit of fear and anxiety, like a healthy bit, not a lot, then it can help you, really. It can, like, keep you alert because, there are a lot of hormones going on in your body, and it can even boost your performance. But if you're not able to manage it, then it can also have detrimental effects. I know a lot of people, for example, this is an interesting question. I know a lot of people who are good enough, but who are very shy. Like, for example, I've seen cases, for example, we're in a classroom and there are several students, and I know that one or two of them are great. They can really speak fluently, but then they're shy, they're embarrassed, they're not taking the stage, they're not taking the floor. And there are some others who are not that great, but who have way more confidence. So maybe they're making a lot of mistakes, like 2 correct sentences, 1 wrong sentence with a lot of mistakes, but they're very confident and they're just talking. And I see this happening a lot. So, like, how can students deal with such a situation? Like, do you have any specific tips in that regard?
To kind of overcome feeling shy or timid in those situations? Usually the main thing that I tell students who feel like they're really struggling with being shy is to start in a situation where you feel really comfortable, whether that's just by yourself in your house reading a book out loud. That's no one else is listening. That's really comfortable. if you're in a classroom and you're with a lot of other people, that might be the ultimate stressor because other people are listening. You've got a teacher who's going to give you corrections. That might be super stressful. So taking it back and saying, okay, I feel fine reading by myself out loud. Now I'm going to maybe find someone who I feel really comfortable with, just one person, whether that's, a teacher or just a friend, and just say, okay, we're going to have this structured conversation. We're just going to ask these 5 questions and really practice slowly together. And then I'm going to go to the next level. And, maybe I'll talk with that same person in a more open way about a topic like, I don't know, travel. There could be a lot of things to talk about. So just slowly working your way up. And maybe that final step is speaking in a classroom. That doesn't seem like you're giving a speech for the Academy Awards, but maybe for you, that's really a stressful situation. So taking it back to the most comfortable thing you can imagine and slowly working your way there is going to help you instead of just
a lot of sense.
Speaking.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's been wonderful, Vanessa. Really, thank you for sharing your experience and your expertise and your tips.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, the thing is, for example, in YouTube Turkey, there are a lot of collaborations with international channels, but these are mostly lifestyle channels. And I think we're doing something very novel here. Like the educational channels do not have a lot of collaborations with international channels. And this is one of its kind. And I'd really like to thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule and meeting and sharing your experience and your knowledge. And I think I really appreciate it. And I'm sure our viewers will really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing that expertise. And if there are anything anything you'd like to share with people here in Turkey, feel free to share it.
Oh, I feel like we've talked about so many things, just taking the opportunity to, reach those goals and stay motivated. It's the biggest thing. Otherwise, you won't reach your goals. Keep motivated and keep learning with you.
Evet, böylece Vanessa ile olan sohbetimizin sonuna geldik. Belki fırsat bulursak bu yıl tekrar Vanessa'yı misafir ederiz. Ya da dediğim gibi bu yıl içerisinde farklı kanallar, farklı yurt dışından kanallarla işbirlikleri planlarımız var. Ama tabii bunlar cidden vakit alan şeyler. Özellikle iki taraflı zaman planlaması, ayarlaması çok zor oluyor. Herkesin programı ciddi anlamda dolu. Ama fırsat bulduğumuz ölçüde ben bu yıl bu tür işbirliklerini devam ettirmeye çalışacağım. Evet, bir sonraki derste görüşmek üzere. Hoşça kalın.